June 20th, 1943, 11:23 a.m., RAF Ringway, England. Major David N. Blake stood on the airfield tarmac, his boots sinking slightly into damp grass. The 35-year-old parachute regiment officer shielded his eyes from the sun, watching as a modified Sherman tank dangled beneath a massive Sterling bomber. The tank's steel hull glinted, its turret locked in place, thick cables securing it to the bomber's undercarriage. Mechanics scurried around, checking connections and shouting final instructions. Blake's gloved hand tightened around his binoculars. In 5 minutes, the Flying Tank, officially designated the A-180 Tetrarch Mark I Airborne tank, would attempt its first live drop. If it worked, it would change how Britain fought behind enemy lines. If it failed, it would be just another World War II silly weapon buried in archives. The bomber's engines roared to life. Blake held his breath. This was the moment they'd gambled months of work on. The A-180 Tetrarch was born from a desperate need. By 1941, Britain's airborne forces, newly formed to counter German paratroopers, lacked heavy firepower. Paratroopers could seize airfields or bridges, but they were helpless against enemy tanks. The War Office wanted a solution, a tank light enough to be carried by a bomber or glider, yet strong enough to take on German Panzer II and III tanks. The answer came from Vickers Armstrong, a British weapons manufacturer that had been experimenting with light tanks since the 1930s. Their Tetrarch Mark I, a 7.6-ton light tank with a 2-pounder gun, was small enough to fit in a glider, but carrying it by air and dropping it safely to the ground required radical modifications. The man tasked with leading the project was Sir Robert McLean, a 52-year-old engineer at Vickers Armstrong with a background in aviation. McLean knew the Tetrarch's original design wouldn't survive an airborne drop. The tank's thin armor, 14 millimeters at its thickest, would crack on impact. Its suspension was too fragile to handle a hard landing. And its engine, a 12-cylinder Meadows engine producing 165 horsepower, would stall if jostled too violently. McLean's team set to work in late 1941, modifying the Tetrarch at Vickers' factory in Newcastle. The first challenge was weight. The Tetrarch already weighed 7.6 tons, the maximum a Sterling bomber could carry. To make it drop-ready, the team removed non-essential parts, the spare fuel tank, the rear machine gun, and even some of the armor plating on the hull sides. They replaced the steel tracks with lighter aluminum ones, shaving 300 pounds off the total weight. They also added a drop frame, a steel cage around the tank's hull, fitted with shock absorbers and parachute attachment points. The frame would distribute the impact force across the tank's body, preventing the hull from crumpling when it hit the ground. Next came the parachute system. The team tested dozens of configurations. Single large parachutes, clusters of small ones, even a combination of parachutes and retro rockets to slow the descent. The rockets were rejected first. They were too heavy and unreliable. A single 50-foot diameter parachute was tested in January 1942, but it collapsed under the tank's weight during a test drop from a crane. The solution was a cluster system, 6 24-foot diameter parachutes, each attached to the drop frame at different points. The parachutes were deployed sequentially, 3 first, then the other 3, to slow the tank evenly. A small static line connected to the bomber would trigger the first set of parachutes the moment the tank was released. The third major modification was the landing gear. The Tetrarch's original suspension used leaf springs, which would snap if the tank landed at more than 10 miles per hour. McLean's team replaced them with coil springs wrapped in rubber. similar to those used in heavy trucks. They also added a layer of foam rubber beneath the tank's crew compartment to cushion the impact for the three-man crew, commander, gunner, driver. Finally, they reinforced the hull's belly with a thick steel plate, 20 millimeters thick, to absorb the brunt of the landing. The first prototype, designated the A-180 Tetrarch Airborne Mark I, was completed in March 1942. It weighed 7.3 tons, had a top speed of 28 miles per hour on roads, and could fire its 2-pounder gun, capable of penetrating 40 millimeters of armor at 500 yards, while on the move. Vickers Armstrong shipped it to RAF Ringway, Britain's main airborne training base, for initial testing. The first test was a static drop. The tank was lifted 50 feet by a crane and lowered to the ground. It landed without damage, but the parachute cluster failed to deploy properly. One chute got tangled. The team redesigned the deployment mechanism, adding a small explosive charge to separate the chutes if they snagged. A second static drop in April 1942 was a success. All 6 parachutes opened, and the tank touched down smoothly. The next step was an airdrop, but first, the team needed a way to carry the tank. The Sterling bomber, Britain's largest heavy bomber at the time, had a maximum payload of 7.5 tons. The Tetrarch, at 7.3 tons, fit, but just barely. Mechanics modified the Sterling's undercarriage, adding a reinforced steel cradle to hold the tank. They also installed a winch system to lower the tank from the bomber mid-flight. The first air test took place on May 15, 1942. The Sterling carried the Tetrarch 50 miles from RAF Ringway to a remote moorland, then released it at 2,000 feet. The parachutes deployed, but a gust of wind spun the tank sideways. It landed on its turret, bending the gun barrel and cracking the hull's side armor. The crew, a test dummy and 2 mechanics, would have been killed. McLean's team went back to the drawing board. They added a stabilization system, small fins on the drop frame that would deploy with the parachutes, keeping the tank upright during descent. They also strengthened the turret's locking mechanism, ensuring it wouldn't spin during the drop. A second air test on June 3, 1942 was better. The tank landed upright, but the foam rubber in the crew compartment compressed too much, fracturing the dummy's ribs. The team added thicker foam and a metal brace behind the seats. By August 1942, the Tetrarch could survive a drop from 1,500 feet with minimal damage. The War Office was impressed enough to order 200 units, with the first production models rolling off the line in October 1942. But there was a problem. The Sterling bomber was too slow and vulnerable to German fighters. Carrying a tank made it even slower. Its top speed dropped from 270 miles per hour to 220 miles per hour, and the added weight made it harder to maneuver. The Royal Air Force, RAF, argued that using Sterlings to drop tanks would result in heavy losses. The solution was the Horsa glider, a large wooden glider that could carry the Tetrarch inside its fuselage. The Horsa was 68 feet long, with an 88-foot wingspan, and could be towed by a Halifax bomber. It could carry the Tetrarch, with its turret removed to save space, and a 4-man crew, tank crew plus 2 glider pilots. Modifying the Tetrarch for the Horsa required more changes. The team removed the turret and stored it separately in the glider's cargo hold. The crew would reattach it once on the ground, a process that took 15 minutes with the right tools. They also added skis to the tank's tracks, so it could slide out of the glider's rear door once the glider landed. The first glider test took place on November 12, 1942, at RAF WWII Norton. The Horsa, towed by a Halifax, carried the Tetrarch 100 miles to a training area in Oxfordshire. The glider landed safely, and the crew reattached the turret in 12 minutes, faster than expected. The tank fired 3 rounds at a dummy target, all hitting dead on. McLean sent a report to the War Office. The Tetrarch can be deployed via glider and ready for combat within 20 minutes of landing. By early 1943, the British 6th Airborne Division, Britain's elite airborne unit, began training with the Tetrarch. Major David Blake's battalion was among the first to receive the tanks. The training was brutal. Paratroopers practiced loading the Tetrarch into gliders in the dark, in rain, in snow, simulating combat conditions. Tank crews trained to reattach the turret blindfolded, in case of low visibility. They practiced driving the tank off gliders onto rough terrain, and firing the 2-pounder gun while moving at full speed. But there were setbacks. In February 1943, a Tetrarch's parachute cluster failed during a drop, killing the 3-man crew. In March, a glider carrying a Tetrarch crashed into a tree, destroying both the glider and the tank. By May 1943, only 120 of the 200 ordered Tetrarchs were operational. The rest lost to training accidents. The Tetrarch's first chance at combat came in July 1943, during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. The 6th Airborne Division was tasked with seizing a key bridge near Syracuse, and the Tetrarchs would support them by destroying German armor. 6 Tetrarchs were loaded into Horsa gliders, towed by Halifax bombers. But the mission was a disaster. Strong winds blew the gliders off course. 2 gliders crashed into the Mediterranean, drowning the crews and sinking the tanks. 1 glider landed in a minefield, destroying the Tetrarch and killing all on board. The remaining 3 gliders landed 5 miles from the bridge. By the time the crews reattached the turrets and reached the target, the bridge had already been seized by paratroopers. The Tetrarch saw no combat, but they proved they could be deployed in a combat zone. Critics in the War Office pounced. They argued the Tetrarch was too fragile, too slow, and too undergunned to be useful. The 2-pounder gun, while effective against early German tanks, couldn't penetrate the armor of a Panzer IV or Panther, and the tank's light armor made it vulnerable to anti-tank rifles. A single hit could disable it. McLean defended the design, arguing that the Tetrarch was never meant to fight heavy tanks. It was meant to support paratroopers, destroy enemy machine gun nests, and provide cover during withdrawals. The War Office agreed to keep the project alive, but cut production to 50 more units. The Tetrarch got a second chance in June 1944, D-Day. The 6th Airborne Division was tasked with seizing Pegasus Bridge, a key crossing of the King Canal in Normandy. The division's 1st Airborne Reconnaissance Squadron was equipped with 12 Tetrarchs, carried in Horsa gliders. This time, the mission went smoothly. The gliders landed within 100 yards of bridge, beak-high German defenses. The crews reattached the turrets in 10 minutes, and the Tetrarchs moved to secure the perimeter. When a German Panzer II tank arrived to retake the bridge, a Tetrarch commanded by Lieutenant John E. Howard fired 3 rounds, disabling the Panzer's tracks and forcing its crew to surrender. It was the Tetrarch's first confirmed kill, but the victory was short-lived. By mid-July, the Tetrarchs were struggling in Normandy's bocage country, thick hedgerows and narrow lanes that limited their mobility. The tank's short barrel, the 2-pounder gun, had a range of only 1,000 yards, made it hard to engage enemies from a distance, and its light armor meant it couldn't withstand fire from German anti-tank guns. On July 18th, during the Battle of Caen, 6 Tetrarchs were destroyed by Panzer IV tanks. The crews suffered heavy losses. Only 12 of 36 men survived. By August 1944, only 3 Tetrarchs remain operational in Normandy. The 6th Airborne Division withdrew the remaining tanks, replacing them with American M5 Stuart light tanks, which were more reliable and better armed. Back in Britain, McLean's team was already working on a better version, A181 Tetrarch Mark II. This model had thicker armor, 25 millimeters at the front, a more powerful 6-pounder gun, capable of penetrating 80 millimeters of armor, and a modified engine that produced 200 horsepower. It also had a quick-release turret that could be reattached in 5 minutes, instead of 15. But the Mark II was heavier, 9.2 tons, which meant it couldn't be carried by a Sterling bomber or horse glider. The team tried to lighten it, removing the skis and using thinner aluminum for the tracks, but it still weighed 8.8 tons, too much for existing aircraft. The Mark II project was canceled in September 1944, as Britain shifted its focus to heavier tanks like the Sherman Firefly. The Tetrarch's final combat mission came in March 1945, during Operation Varsity, the Allied airborne invasion of Germany's Rhine River defenses. 4 Tetrarchs were deployed with the 17th Airborne Division, tasked with securing a village near Wesel. The tanks were dropped by Sterling bombers, and all 4 landed safely. They supported paratroopers in clearing the village, destroying 2 German machine gun nests and a half-track. But on March 25th, a German Panzerfaust anti-tank rocket hit 1 Tetrarch's hull, killing the driver and setting the tank on fire. The remaining 3 tanks were withdrawn, and the Tetrarch was officially retired from frontline service in April 1945. When World War II ended in May 1945, only 47 Tetrarchs remained, most used for training or stored in depots. The War Office's final report on the project was mixed. The A180 Tetrarch demonstrated that airborne armor is feasible. However, its light armor and limited firepower make it unsuitable for modern combat. Vickers Armstrong tried to sell the design to other countries, India, Australia, Canada, but no one bought it. The Tetrarch was too specialized, too fragile, and too outdated compared to post-war tanks. By 1950, most surviving Tetrarchs were scrapped, their steel melted down for other uses. But the Tetrarch's legacy wasn't lost. Its design influenced post-war airborne armor. The British Army's FV-432 armored personnel carrier, introduced in the 1960s, used a modified version of the Tetrarch suspension system. The American M551 Sheridan, a light airborne tank deployed in Vietnam, borrowed the Tetrarch's glider transportable design. Even modern military gliders used to carry light vehicles owe a debt to the Horsa-Tetrarch combination. The idea of a tank that could be flown behind enemy lines and deployed quickly became a staple of airborne doctrine. The Tetrarch also taught Britain's military valuable lessons about innovation. It showed that ridiculous ideas could have merit. The flying tank, once mocked, proved it could fight and win. It highlighted the importance of testing. The early accidents, while tragic, led to critical modifications that made the tank safer. And it demonstrated that airborne forces needed heavy firepower, a lesson Britain carried into the Cold War, when it developed dedicated airborne anti-tank weapons and heavier glider transportable vehicles. Sir Robert McLean retired from Vickers Armstrong in 1948. He never worked on another tank project, but he often spoke about the Tetrarch in interviews. It was a compromise, he said in a 1955 article for The Engineer. We needed something fast, light, and airborne, and we got it. It wasn't perfect, but it paved the way for better things. McLean died in 1964, his role in creating Britain's flying tank largely forgotten. Major David Blake stayed in the Army, serving in Korea and Malaya before retiring as a colonel in 1960. In his memoir, Parachutes and Tanks, he wrote about the Tetrarch with affection. It was a tricky thing to fly, a handful to drive, and a joy to fight in. It didn't look like much, but it saved lives. That's all you can ask of a weapon. Blake died in 1998, but his collection of Tetrarch photographs and manuals is now stored at the Imperial War Museum in London. Today, only 3 Tetrarchs survive. One is on display at the Tank Museum in Bovington, England, its hull scarred from a D-Day bullet hit, its turret slightly askew. Another sits in the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, donated by Britain in 1946. The third is in a private collection in Australia, restored to running condition and used in World War II reenactments. The Tank Museum's exhibit plaque sums up the Tetrarch's place in history, Britain's first and only flying tank. It was flawed, it was risky, but it was real. It proved that even the most ridiculous ideas can change warfare. The Tetrarch was never a great tank. It was too light, too slow, too undergunned, but it was a pioneer. It showed that paratroopers didn't have to be defenseless against armor. It proved that tanks could fly, or at least be carried through the air and drop safely. It was a product of WWII's chaos, a time when Britain had to try anything to win, and in that it succeeded. On June 20th, 2023, the 80th anniversary of the first Tetrarch drop, a small ceremony was held at RAF Ringway, now Manchester Airport. Veterans of the 6th Airborne Division, their uniforms faded but their medals polished, gathered to honor the flying tank. A replica Tetrarch, built from original plans, was displayed on the tarmac. A Sterling bomber flyover roared overhead, its engines echoing the past. One veteran, 98-year-old Private Thomas G. Evans, who had served as a Tetrarch loader in Normandy, touched the replica's hull. It was a daft idea, he said, smiling, but it worked, and that's what matters. Britain's flying tank was never going to win World War II. It was never going to be remembered alongside the Spitfire or the Churchill tank, but deserves to be remembered not as a ridiculous failure, but as a brave experiment. It was a reminder that in war, sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that pave the way for progress. It was a testament to the engineers, soldiers, and mechanics who gambled on something new, and it was a real working machine, a flying tank that once soared over England's skies, then fought on Normandy's fields. That, in the end, is more than most silly weapons can claim.